Hello and welcome to another We Are Developers Live. It's Wednesday again, and we scrambled to put our things together. The first bad news is the guest that we invited this week didn't show up because he had a problem. The good thing is he brought his boss along, so we can talk to him as well. But yeah, in general, I mean, it's like we should be good enough, right? Like, I mean, both
Yeah,
of us have things to say, so I think that should be fine, right?
we'll be fine. We'll be fine. We always are. And we've had a quick chat to our guest anyway, and we know he's good to go. He's from a different location. Let's put it like that. Maybe we'll wait until we bring him on screen until we actually say where he is right now. But yeah, he's managed to pull it together and be our guest for today. So yeah, it's going to be good.
Cool.
There he is.
And here he is. He whipped
Hey
in from
guys.
the side. We got Brian Whippo from the Algorand Foundation. You are in Amsterdam right now, right?
I am in my hotel in Amsterdam getting ready for JS Nation tomorrow for the JavaScript devs out there. Get excited.
Yeah, it was good fun when I spoke there. It's a nice crowd, and food was really good as well. So it was really good, well organized event. And I mean, it's like it always fascinates me at the end of the event. Like last time, it was like this big hall, and there was a DJ at the end, and nobody cared. I always feel bad about DJs and bands that play at IT conferences, right? Like you're there to network, and I mean, we pay money for them as organizers, but it feels like I mean, a DJ, I don't mind as much, but as a band, it's really, really depressing at times. Like when you're there and nobody bothers, just basically like talks about, I don't know, sorting algorithms while you're trying to rock and roll or something.
Right, right. Just want to nerd out with your friends.
It's
Well,
really
you do get
bizarre
those.
when they also don't mix the. I don't know. I mean, there is this search company that's not Bing that does this big event called I/O in San Francisco every year. And for like 3 years, they had like the most random things on stage. They had like Jane's Addiction, which I really, really loved, like because I'm a big old punk fan. But I'm like, you don't do a band that hates the establishment and hates commercialism and put them on stage and not guess that they're going to say horrible things at when they're drunk. So and that happened, and yeah, it was. And the other year was oh god, what's his name? White wedding guy,
Oh, Billy Idol.
Billy Idol, and
Yeah.
like yeah, I mean, I just barely recognized him in my youth, and everybody in the audience was like 17 to 19, and they're like, "Who's this old man that tries to impress people there?" It's really, really, it was really interesting to see. Then again, at Brazil JS one time, they had a punk band at the after party, and that was, of course, all for me. So I stage dived at that after party at that JavaScript
Oh
event,
wow.
and that was the most tweeted picture of the whole event. And it really annoyed the inventor of JavaScript who had a big announcement and that thing, and nobody tweeted about that one. And I
And
told
you
him like,
eclipsed him.
could have done it too, like it's.
It's true.
But yeah, it was Brazil and it's rock, so it really worked out. So that was quite fun. So quickly to know what you're on about. Like we're gonna have a coffee with developers with you as well, and with your colleague Larkin, we're gonna have an in-depth talk about some things as well. So what is the Algorand Foundation about, and what how is it connected to the rand of other things out there?
Yeah. So the Algorand Foundation is the nonprofit entity that promotes the adoption of the Algorand blockchain, which is a layer one blockchain platform, smart contract platform. And we basically work with developers and businesses and all kinds of builders to solve problems using the technology. And it's a really fun job for me. I'm the head of DevRel there because I get to work with people to solve problems and map real world issues to technology abstractions. And so one of the things that I get to do a lot and I really enjoy is to talk to people about where blockchain is really being used, right, in the real world. It's not theoretical anymore, and we really lean into those use cases now because uh, in the talk we talk about the hype cycle and where we are in that cycle, but we're kind of working our way back up through enlightenment to actual adoption. So it's cool, and although we are second fiddle to the AI hype cycle now, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on with the application of this technology. So I just like nerding out about it and sort of disarming people of either dismissing or rejecting it as a technology, because that's all it is. It's an infrastructure. It's a tool.
It's really tricky to recover from that overhype, isn't it? Like you just basically. I remember when blockchain came around and when cryptocurrencies came around, I was like, oh, that's cool, geeky stuff. And then horrible people came in, like just like talking about money,
Yeah,
money, money, and you're like, oh, and getting hearts and minds back into that. How do you do that? Like, do you stay like, I'm not a
great
crypto bro,
question.
and then you start talking, or what's going on there?
Well, we have to be very self-deprecating, and we definitely distance ourselves from that concept of the crypto bro and all of the sort of speculative excitement, because while cryptocurrencies are one application of this technology, you can do all sorts of other things with an immutable append-only ledger, right? You can disintermediate markets. And essentially, the short answer is we talk about the use cases where businesses are live today doing really interesting stuff with the public blockchain. And as you talked about with our CTO, John Woods at WeAreDevelopers last year, there's like certain things that blockchain is good for. We're long past that phase where we think it can solve every problem. We know that it doesn't solve most problems, but there's like a few categories of things that it works really well for. So we try to lean into that and just convey to people that it's not so much about the shill and the hype anymore, but we're like sleeves rolled up in the weeds, working on real problems.
That's cool. Yeah. I remember like one of the first talks when I moderated and the person came up about cryptocurrency and he's like, yeah, and I bought my car in a parking lot at 3 in the morning from another guy just sending my crypto money to his mobile phone. And I'm like, you're describing a drug trade. This is what you basically, nobody goes and buys things at 3 o'clock in the morning in a parking lot. This is not technological freedom. This is just weird. But yeah, I guess we're past that stage by now.
Yeah, there's some parallels to the early internet as well, where it was used for nefarious things, but at the end of the day, it's a communication protocol, and you can use the internet for good or evil. And a distributed ledger, a distributed, execution platform or virtual machine can also be used for good or evil. And we try to lean into the things that really make the world a better place, or just solve certain kinds of business problems well.
So what are you doing at a JavaScript conference tomorrow? What are you talking about there?
There's a couple of reasons that we're at a JavaScript conference. One is we want to connect with app developers because there's some interesting things going on. You may have heard about this AI thing, and there's some neat intersections between AI and blockchain. And we're also at the frontier of blockchain entering the regulated realm. So in Europe and soon in the US and in other jurisdictions, it's maturing through the regulatory frameworks in many countries and jurisdictions. So while it may have been the Wild West before, very soon we will have regulated stable coins and people will be able to run serious businesses with this technology in that context. So that's one reason why it's still relevant today to be thinking about how to employ this technology. The other reason is we did something pretty cool where we recognize building blockchain apps often required learning another programming language to write smart contracts and program the money on chain. So to reduce that barrier to entry, we created a compiler that lets people write in languages they already know. So first was Python. That came out last year, and you can write syntactically and semantically correct Python. And our Puya compiler goes through a few intermediate representations and compiles it down to the bytecode that runs on the blockchain in the virtual machine. This year, we did it for TypeScript. So if you're a JavaScript developer, a TypeScript developer, you don't have to learn another language anymore. You could write a whole full stack app in TypeScript, including the part that runs in the virtual machine on chain, and all in one language. So that's our new contribution on the technology front. And I think it really makes building blockchain enabled apps more accessible for the average web developer.
There's weird stuff going on. Matteo from Node.js just made the thing where you can write PHP in JavaScript. And that's just like, that's where craziness happens. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I remember PHP GTK. That was basically just bundling the PHP exe with the GTK environment so you can actually have it as an installable app. And that means like one line of PHP would always be 50 meg application. So that's just bonkers what people do these days. But yeah, I don't know what the use case of that one was, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. So JSNH tomorrow, see Brian Whippo, and yeah, sadly enough, I wasn't there this year. I still got the hoodie, so that's pretty good. So let's go through some of the things that we collected over the week to talk about, because that's what this show is to a degree about. The first thing you might see is that we have a banner there, which is such a wonderful, so like going back to the 90s thing. But it's PenPod. They just have they're good friends of ours. They're going to be here next week as well and talk about what they're doing and talk about how they're actually writing a new renderer for their platform, because right now they're using Clojure. And they want to go to like WebAssembly and Canvas as well to get like a better interface with that. They also just wrote a really nice article on our magazine. So if you want to know what PenPod is about, go to the magazine and read it there. I'm really looking forward to seeing them tomorrow. And it was quite fun to actually put that thing in there, because I remember one of my first jobs that I basically made extra money on the side with my web development thing was optimizing banners. And they were like 400 by 40 pixels or 480 by 60 pixels. And the GIFs were allowed to be like less than 50K, and like even less, but 20K was another thing. So I was really, really good in optimizing GIFs and like with like on the command line and all these bits and bobs. And yeah, people forget about these wonderful things we used to have in the past, but seems like, yeah, I don't mind that there's not 10,000 banners on things anymore, but I actually kind of preferred them to like 10,000 pop-ups or auto-playing videos, right?
It depends where you
A
go.
humble banner.
Yeah. Depends where you go as well, doesn't it? I mean, those we were saying last week, you go on like any news website and it's just solid, isn't it? And I understand why, but it sometimes feels like you've gone back to that old web, but not in a good way. You don't look at those news sites and go, oh, it's so nostalgic. It feels like the old web where there's everything moving and it's, but at the same time, I was it 468? What was it, the dimensions, Chris? Because I have a vague recollection of that.
468 by 60 or 400 by 40.
Yeah, crazy that you remember those, isn't it? They just get seared into your mind, but they do, Yeah.
Yeah, there were interesting things. I remember like one of them was about a rollover button generator that was basically just I had to do, and it was like a picture of Beethoven, and I was like rollover Beethoven, and then I had like a dog rollover Fido, and these kind of things. So yeah, it was wild times. But yeah, people paid for that. It was interesting. Now, the first thing I want to talk about today is that we have a new Code 100 challenge. And the thing is, there's going to be a Code 100 at the Congress again. Brian, if you don't know, Code 100 is a live coding competition on stage where people have to code against each other. So we give them a laptop and we give them a development environment, much like VS Code. And they can use any language that they want to and actually solve a problem. My job is to come up with problems to solve that is independent of programming language, which is sometimes challenging as well. But it's interesting to see what people do when they're not connected, when they don't have an AI code helper, or when they cannot actually look things up and really have to code on time against each other. So it's kind of fun, but it's also quite challenging and interesting to see how people actually how people fare doing that kind of thing. I also want to point out that we have this website that you see here is available at this URL. So if you're online and you want to see it, you can go there and click all the links and try all the bits and bobs out as well. And this is what the challenge looks like this time. So let me go to the other computer to do that. So this is the challenge that I came up with. Again, I'm not knowing where left and right is. This is bizarre. Okay. As we are in the middle of Pride Month, I thought I'd do a hearts and minds challenge with like rainbow hearts and brains. And this is what the picture looks like. So it's a big bunch of things, and it's basically an HTML document that creates those. So basically, this is what it looks like. If you take a look at the source, you can actually see. Oops. Interesting. Oh yeah. Takes a while. If you look at the source, this is what it looks like. And your job is to find out a few things about that. Your job is to find out, first of all, how many of these hearts and how many of the brains are straight. meaning they point straight up, they point to the top, to the bottom, they point to the left, or they point to the right. And then also how many of these mines are on the left side of the bunch and how many of the hearts are on the right side of the bunch. So the whole thing is basically an HTML page. So your job is to scrape that HTML page, take a look at it, or ask ChatGPT to do it and fail at it, and then tell us what you think and how you've done it. There's also an application form. So if you want to have a go at that, you can actually just fill out the form. And then we also need more information from you, like how did you do it, what kind of programming language you want to have, if there's a t-shirt size, because the winners actually will be invited to our Congress to do the whole thing live on stage. Of course, not the same challenge, but a different one. And yeah, so how would you go about this, Brian, if you get a challenge like that?
So there's a few questions here. I guess for the which ones are straight, you've got to identify the set of all of the hearts and minds, and then look where they've been, modified to be at an angle. And I'd probably go through and see what CSS classes are applied to these things, and maybe be able to bucket them into different groups. So you'd have to kind of parse through any styling that is either straight or not straight, because there'll be some overlap there. But without being able to see the code yet, I would have to wonder if there might be like multiple styles applied to some of these things that would need to be considered together. And then the left and right is a positioning thing. I probably want to look at the markup on that one, but there's definitely some translation going on here to move things around on the screen. Yeah, so you're probably kind of scraping through, figuring out what styles are applied to which of these things, and then sort of bucketing them to answer the questions that you've articulated there. Yeah,
I
and
mean,
the left and right is interesting as well, because you have to understand where they are in absolute terms on the page as well, because they could be translated in weird ways.
how about you, Dan?
I mean, is there much more I can add? That was really well put. I think it was methodical. I try not to give too much away with my face, because I've sort of seen how this is done. When me and Chris spoke about it, I was overcomplicating it, like most people, right? You kind of think, oh, okay, a bit like you were, Brian. I think it's surprising. There's a couple of bits along the way when you see the actual answer to it, where you go, oh yeah, I could have just done that. And I would say, I know Chris, and I know that there's always a trick where he'll get you to overthink. He'll make you overthink, and then the answer's a bit simpler. So I would probably go with something simple. I would be just same sort of thing as you're saying, Brian. It would be all about sorting and just trying to organize the data to start with, at least to sort of see how even just like visually, if the numbers add up. I think that's always something I would go with a little bit, is like, do the numbers that I'm getting in return roughly relate to what I'm looking at? Well, I'm on the right path, and I'd keep going like that. But maybe that's just giving you an insight into how much I wing these kinds of things. But yeah, it's a good challenge, good fun. And I've only just realized some of the puns that are in there, how many of these are straight, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Always, Chris, always lots of layering. Very good.
Yeah, I always want. I mean, I haven't written a solution yet. I only wrote the riddle so far, and that was done in PHP. So I probably would do solution in JavaScript, or I mean, you can take any language that you want to. It would also be fun to try some of the code editors out there and see, like, give that to ChatGPT and give it to others and say, like, okay, what do you think about that? And if the results would be right, I would be surprised if it manages to do it. But then again, I'm surprised by most of the things that it does right, so I'm not too confused about this. So there's an interesting paper that I came across that's called, like, what do professional software developers need to know to succeed in an age of artificial intelligence, from Cornell University. And I found that very interesting. There's like a survey result going on there. I mean, it kind of meshes with my ideas, what I have. What do you think, Brian? Like, as somebody that we are in the age of AI, what do you think might be knowledge or like ideas how to work that cannot be taken away or cannot be automated away from us? What would be an advice from you to developers to consider right now?
My view is that AI is a tool that will progressively automate things sort of from the bottom up in terms of complexity. And hopefully it enables developers and engineers to get out of really low level things and spend more time on designing architecture and also understanding what your customer wants and the problem they're actually trying to solve and the outcome they're trying to achieve. So I always look at automation as sort of moving people up the skill curve, and there will be some people that very naturally move up that skill curve, and some people may find it a bit uncomfortable. But this is an upskilling moment, right? It's about learning another tool in your tool belt, and it doesn't like I try to sort of de-emphasize the emotional like threat of like losing jobs and so forth, right? All the technology that we have created to date has not wiped out tons of jobs. In many cases, industries have more jobs because productivity goes so far up and demand for whatever it was increases. So that'd be my hot take.
I
How
wonder
about
if on
you,
the back,
Dan?
I mean, I agree. I think you made a really good point where you say this is an upskilling moment, and I think we have got another sort of story later on where somebody had posted, I think it was on Mastodon, something along the lines of, here's all the things that have been historically kind of touted as this is going to end our careers, this is going to put developers out of jobs, and it went all the way from like COBOL to all the way through to through to AI and everything else in between. I do think though the paper does it. When you said about like sort of trying to take away, there's the post on screen, so we can see from like SQL Basic, all the way through Visual Basic, no code platforms, LLMs. We've all been told that they're going to make us obsolete. I do think though there's something in that article or that paper that's really helpful, because it does take some of the emotion away, and it's the part where it says essentially, here's how I would summarize it. There's 4 main domains that you need to look at if a staff member can do them or work in them, and they would say that number 1 is generate AI effectively, core software engineering. So it's saying this is still important. You need to know how to write code. Adjacent engineering, and then adjacent non-engineering. So just a bit of the maybe the more generalism or the wider set of skills. And so it's saying, okay, we're going to have those 4, but then also the part at the end where it says essentially we need to target both soft skills and technical skills in all of those 4 domains to reskill, upskill, and safeguard against de-skilling. And I thought that really hits the nail on the head. It's just we're thinking about it now, so we know how to adapt. It's not, we're not static. We're not just here saying, well, we quit, AI wins, let's all just admit defeat. We are actually trying to adapt, and papers like this kind of help you see how in quite simple, non-academic ways. So yeah, it made me actually a little less scared about losing my job.
Yeah.
How do we defend against de-skilling? That's something that I worry about.
Well, I mean, we didn't even need AI for that. I mean, we talked earlier that you're going to go to a JavaScript conference, and then there's a React conference coming up. Like there's discussions also with people like, how do you even start a website without a build chain first? And you're like, no, this is not exactly what it needed to be. So I think there's a fine line between de-skilling and skills just not being necessary anymore. And I think there has been a whole round of like frameworks invented and stuff where people said like, this skill is not needed any longer, you don't need to know about this. And then when you need to debug code that has been generated by an AI, you need these skills again. So
Right.
the penchant of taking things apart and taking a look at them and seeing how they work, I think is something that should never go away. Knowing the perfect syntax from everything by heart, or being able to look at a hex color and say like what color that is a skill I have that I don't need, but it's just wired in my brain. But these kind of things I don't think are that necessary. But it's interesting to see that also the de-skilling bit, to me, when I don't use a technology or even anything out there, if I don't cycle for a long time, I'm not good at cycling anymore as I used to be. So it's just a matter of like using these things over and over again. So by automating everything away and throwing it to an agent to do it for me, it will be harder for me to get into the swing of things again. But that might be a de-skilling thing where it's just like, I don't use it, so I don't know about it anymore.
Yeah, the muscle memory fades.
Yeah. This was an interesting one, like a paper, not a paper, but an article about you can vibe code your way to a seed round. And yeah. Yeah, I mean, is it really necessary? I mean, the idea of a seed round is that most of the time when I talk to VCs, they don't want to see an app. They want to see an idea. They want to see what you're actually doing. So the whole idea of like, oh, I vibe code an app and dazzle VC people and then they throw money at me. I hope it doesn't work, but it may.
Do you want it? I mean, when either of you, when you build an app, is that your first thought that you want VC funding? And I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at this in the wrong way, but it feels like there's maybe more so in the States. I hear a lot about, you know, VC and kind of investment in Silicon Valley, and it's very much a part of the conversation. But I know, Chris, we've spoken about it before, as the parallels for me are with music, that it feels like it's a record label in a way that you want, but you don't then realize that you when you sign to that record label, you give up a lot of control and direction, and ultimately it's not yours anymore. It's now it's a commodity that somebody needs to make money of, and they need you to do the things that allow them to make money, and then you're effectively looking for an exit, which makes sense if you're trying to sell the app or whatever. But you know, if we sort of think about what that means, it's something you've built that you loved. Maybe you just vibe coded it and you didn't love it, and that's why you just want VC funding. It's just, you know, a transaction. I made something, someone's going to give me money for it. But it feels very depersonalized to me. It feels like I'm just building things to get money, and then who cares? I don't know, maybe that's just my view on it, but I wouldn't want somebody to have that control, is what I'm saying as well. How do you feel about it, Brian? Does that cross your mind, or do you not even think of it?
I think in many cases there are developers that love the craft, and losing control of something that maybe a passion project would not be appealing. I think there is an opportunity with vibe coding to do a couple of things. One would be, sometimes you really do need a working app or a UI to get people to have that aha moment about an idea, and you could get there a lot faster and validate that idea, and it really resonates with people. So vibe coding might be a tool to get there faster. I also think about uh, certain apps or certain businesses that have bootstrapping problems where you really do need a lot of money to get something going. And a lot of the big successful businesses that we see today, I always think back to Uber when they first started. The rides were really cheap, right? Because it was all subsidized by VC money and people got used to that. So sometimes there's investment capital needed to get to a scale where the business works, and it's just a necessary part of that path. But not every app needs a VC to get it off the ground. And if the primary cost before was engineering, the LLM's capabilities are going to chip away at that, and you might see, if we've heard Sam Altman speculate, the first billion-dollar company with a single developer, right? A solo billionaire. That could be in our future.
Mm.
Mind you, I mean, jQuery was one person. Like there's curl was one guy. Like there's always been these like features that are one person. And yeah, companies as well. I mean, there were like freelancers that do things that were whole design that looked like whole design agencies. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's one company turned out to be 700 developers in India rather than an AI. But yeah, you never know. But I find the concept interesting that that the seed round is the goal, and that basically, and you know what, vibe coding is okay for that. I really, if you really only want to get money and get into it for the thing, I feel sorry for your engineers, because they put their effort in and they put the craft in and they want to care about it. And when you're actually in a company that actually just wants to have a serial entrepreneurship and do like 10 companies in like 3 years, I wouldn't want to work for them. But I mean, if that's something that you can do with vibe coding, fine. But it feels like I like the idea that we push the whole unpersonal thing that you talked about, Dan, into the world of vibe coding and AI. So generate code to dazzle people to get money that you don't need any longer, and like these kind of things. So I find it interesting that it becomes so self-referential now, rather than just what you do with the seed round there. I'm not sure. I never got a seed round. I was a freelancer at a while. I'm an angel investor in some companies, but I actually looked at them to actually care about the craft and not care about like a quick exit. When it comes to social media answers, I love this one as well, where it's like ChatGPT, doesn't matter how right or wrong it is, it doesn't make you feel dumb. And then the answer was like, if you're not comfortable feeling dumb 90% of the time, programming probably isn't for you. I kind of agree.
Yeah, that resonates.
Yeah, all three of us just silently nodded. I think we all agree on that. But why do we like it then? That's my question back to you is, I tried to explain this once. It was to my wife. She said, I have no idea why you choose to do this at like 11 o'clock at night on your own. You sit in a dark room and you tippy tap, you know. And I said, because it's like having a big shoelace that's really tied up, and you always feel like you're just about to finish it and untie it and everything's perfect. And just as you do, a new one appears and you just keep going. And it's like you're just chasing it's like, you know, holding a carrot in front of you, and you're doing that to yourself forever.
Yeah.
And that's why you like it. There's nothing else to it for me. I mean, I don't know, is that just me, or do you agree, or
No way, no way. I think there's something universal about, fixing that bug or getting the app to run or getting something to work, and you get that dopamine hit, right? It's like it's deeply like physiological, and that resonates with a lot of people. And you know, whether you've got like ADHD or like something else going on, like it resonates with your brain when those moments happen, and you're always seeking the next one. The other thing I would say is years ago, I was into all sorts of different hobbies, but I was sort of finding the bottom of them without spending like gobs of money. And I was looking for something I wouldn't find the bottom of. And I think that's something beautiful about programming. There's so many layers to it. You will never understand it all and get bored, right? That you could just go all the way down to like the chip level if you really, really wanted to. So I think it's fun to play in an arena where you don't know everything and you're always learning. And that just resonates with me.
Yeah, I mean, I thought always with like writing assembly language was the latest, and then I was at at an Intel conference, and I met people that actually write the embedded software on chipsets and graphics cards, and you're like, okay, there's another level. I did not know that.
Yep.
It's interesting. You know,
And then you get
it's
into the
really,
hardware engineering, which is really wild.
yeah. Oh, I mean, there's a guy that I might want to interview here that I know from the demo scene and on a Commodore 64, like geeky shit. But he did just a thing where he had a cable that he connected. I mean, the old monitors had like three cables. They had like the audio, the video, and the chroma, the color. And then basically he connected the audio cable to the image output and made an animation with like playing sounds through it on the screen. So like completely mental, and like I have no idea why he did that. He did another one where he had like a thing running, and then he cut the cable, and then the other effect started because of the cutting of the cable,
Oh,
and
wow.
all kind of weird stuff going on there. And I love that people go down the rabbit hole and just basically want to try things out. I mean, the other thing is when people say like that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I mean, how many times have you done that in coding? You just basically changed one thing around, and the third time you changed it, it worked. And you're like, what's going on here?
It disproves the theory because you eventually got it to work.
I mean, my favorite is like the difference between a junior developer and a senior developer. A junior developer is like the first time, oh, it works. The second, a senior developer, when it works the first time, you're like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it
It
can't be
was
that
too
it
easy.
actually is perfect the first time. Like there's something going on there. Like I don't know what's going on. This was another interesting one where it's like that most workers globally are at small and medium companies, less than 250 people with functional hiring. We obsess over Google, Amazon's bizarre processes, and their outliers. 90% of businesses are small, employing 60 to 70% people in deployed economies. Why let dysfunctional giants dominate how work should be done when most companies actually work? I found that really insightful.
That's an interesting one. I've recently gone from a very large company. So I've spent most of my career at Morgan Stanley at a bank, right? Lots of process, lots of structure. Now I'm at a very small company, less than 100 people. And I would say that when you have a small company, there's a like a certain size at which people kind of know what's going on and they can communicate with each other really easily. And then you start to get a little bit bigger and it doesn't really work anymore. And the glue work that sort of holds together all that collaboration is a lot of effort. And so personally, I'm a very structured person. I like a good process so that people can just focus on, delivering value asynchronously. And but that said, there's limits to these things, and trying to implement a highly structured.
You muted. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, trying to put a Google-sized process into a small company is just gonna is going to backfire, right? It's too heavy, it's too rigid, and it doesn't leave room for, like creative spontaneity or people to move fast and strike while the iron's hot on something that requires moving fast on.
I think the maybe it's one of those like missing out things that basically you look up to the really successful ones and say like, hey, if you do what they do, you will be as successful, but it doesn't scale for you at all. It's a bit like people that go see bands and say like, if I only had the same guitar, I could play like him. And you're like, no, not necessarily. Like it's a very strange thing that we see these companies as super successful, but if you think about what they do to people in these massive rounds of layoffs right now, it's actually completely unprofessional. And it feels like, and it's a necessity because of the stock market price rather than like how the company runs. It feels like the idea of taking a look at companies that are smaller but very successful might be more interesting than looking at the big players and always trying to shoot for the moon and be like the next Google or the next Meta or whatever.
But is that the pressure, I suppose, on those companies that, if we're not going to sort of put a ceiling on top of a company and saying that's as big as you ever get. I guess that people have always got their mind on, well, if we do grow, if we double in size of our, our team size or whatever it might be, or our revenue, so you've always got to have that next step to kind of strive for. And I do think that those big companies have, especially sort of 10, 15 years ago, did a really good job of like almost exporting the culture of their companies outwardly. Everybody has that image of, the bean bags at Google, and everyone seemingly just sort of on exercise bikes or whatever, doing all these kind of strange things that you would see in the different campuses. And I think that people still strive for that, where it seemed like a bit of a utopia for developers, right? They're around tech people. They never really need to leave. They can even bring their kids to work and leave them there while they go and do another shift or something. But, I can kind of understand how it's got that utopia kind of vision that we all still sort of think, well, maybe my company could be like that in an idealistic world. Maybe it's that.
Well, I think it goes back to these like handbooks as well, like seven habits of highly effective people and these kind of things. That goes back to the 70s and 80s, like or how did Toyota do it and how did those do it? It's like it always trying to recreate the success without realizing that there was a lot of failure in it as well. I mean, Amazon was writing red numbers for decades, and then it became a successful thing. And they invested in the last mile and the delivery to people's houses, and that's where the money, that's where the success came in. But before that, it was just like not as successful as we think it might be. And I mean, I'm all for happy sizing your company, like basically knowing what you are, and actually, here I'm big enough. I don't want more. As a freelancer, I always had that problem. I'm like, okay, when I put too much effort into one customer, I don't have time for other customers anymore. So you basically you want to scale to 1,000, or you want to scale to 100, or do you have like 6 customers that are really happy with what you do? That's always a question that you have to ask yourself. And I'm done with like growth all the time. I mean, can you talk to Morgan Stanley? Because there's this wonderful meta tag in HTML pages that if you have a login page, it actually scales it to the size of the monitor or the mobile phone. And Morgan Stanley is one of those that shows me my desktop thing on my mobile phone. I have no idea how to log in. It's just like login systems, like sign up pages for Wi-Fi and bank sites are the only ones that still do that wrong. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Definitely not on the cutting edge there, but the mobile app's pretty good.
Fair enough. I haven't tried that one yet. Maybe that's my mistake here. I found this one really cool as well. Ted Drake used to work with him at Yahoo back then as accessibility consultant. And I totally love the idea, like if you answer it twice, make it an article. And to a degree, this is how my blog kind of started as well, in newsletters, people in what's it called? Mail, basically mailing lists. And the people asked me a thing, and I wrote it twice, and third time, and then like, you know what? I ran an article and point to that one instead. Do you think that's still a valid DevRel thing to do, or is it something that we just should hope that AI gives us the answer because it got indexed 5 years ago?
Oh, wow. So I definitely think this is still a thing to do. We just put a ton of effort into our docs, and I'm kind of zealous about this. If I see the question multiple times, then it should probably be discoverable in our docs. We should have an example for that. It should be discussed explicitly, and then you can refer people to that and spend less time on, regurgitating the content and more time on other parts of the relationship. But the AI point you made is really interesting because we are struggling with this as sort of a frontier technology because we just launched a whole bunch of new documentation in March, but the latest LLMs like Claude 4, their training set only goes to January. So we're not covered by these LLMs yet. Now, you can use other techniques to refer to specific documentation to answer questions, but what we've found is the underlying data is so important to enabling the LLMs to answer correctly. And somebody has to do the work to comment the code or write the article or create the reference example for, then all the LLMs going forward to be able to find that more easily. Because what I think we're learning, and Apple published a paper about this the other day, is that LLMs are not really reasoning. They're just really good at pattern recognition. But if that pattern doesn't exist in the underlying data somewhere out on the internet, will it recognize it? Maybe not.
Hmm. That's a tricky one. I mean, that brings us to the whole SEO thing as well. Like, how do you get your documentation indexed? I mean, there's MCPs you can do. You can do all kind of stuff, and most big ones say that they're searching the web as well to actually refresh it and get newer information in there. But yeah, it's really tricky to do that, to get that indexed in a world like that. I'm still wondering if that really is the world. Like, I've seen other papers that say like a lot of like AI stuff is people publishing, but not people consuming. Like, I've seen people, of course, use ChatGPT for everything, and when you use Bing or Google, you get it pushed into your face right now, that summary. But I don't see people flocking to it and saying like, "Oh, I really want ChatGPT to answer me everything." I think people are still happy to go to websites and read documentation and stuff. But the question is if that's going to be a generational thing that's going to go away, or if there's going to be a backlash. I'm not surprised if people would be reading books again if they got too annoyed with AI shouting in their face all the time.
I will say that the ability to read and comprehend and reason about things will not go away with better and better LLMs. I mean, these things are still fundamentally putting structured text in front of you, whether it's creative writing or technical writing. People need to continue to hone that skill of critical reading and comprehension. So I hope that people still know when to sort of eject out of AI and say, I've got to take the wheel, right? We're not in self-driving mode here anymore, and reason through something as a human. The trouble is, I think humans are at high risk of becoming complacent when automation approaches 100%. You see it with self-driving cars. It's been written about in the context of autopilot with planes. So are people going to be prepared to go to the docs and reason through it as a human when the LLM or some other system can't get it right?
Hmm. I guess maps is not a great example. I mean, when I go to another country nowadays, I just basically download my map because I might not be online, but I really don't buy any books or read about the place or try to find my way. I just hope that Google Maps does it for me, and it does most of the time. So I think that's one thing where we got completely reliant on it. I remember the one of the first times somebody in my company back then in Seattle rented a car with one of those drive by the hour things, and they went up on a hill, like a really big mountain, and ended up being not connected anymore to the internet and couldn't unlock the car any longer when they tried to go back from their hike. And of course, not having a phone, they couldn't call even the company and say like what to do now. So they had to go to a ranger hut and actually make them call to call the company. And that's the kind of thing, like, what do you do like when there's no connectivity? Do you automatically open the car, or do you just not shut it down, or like that's the kind of like, do we think about these cases? But yeah, you're right. Like, how dependent are we on these things? Seeing that we actually generate stuff, this was an interesting one, but that basically when you do a GitHub release, this social change log creates basically social media posts from the change log accordingly. And it's by Nicholas Sarkos. Again, I didn't know that actually. I worked with him before. He's a really nice, interesting guy. But yeah, so basically you could actually just do the release on GitHub and then do social media posts directly from that. I think this is a kind of cool use case if you actually do your changelog the right way, because then you reuse the content that you've written in other formats rather than just like regurgitating and having to write it by hand. It also means that you have to write it the right way. But I like this kind of stuff. That is really interesting to when you write a changelog that hardly anybody ever reads. Unless they actually also reporting on news, then they actually find interesting bits in there. This is an interesting way to automate that information, and it's something that might be interesting for Algorand or some people like that as well. Because I always feel bad of writing good comments, writing good pull requests, writing good change logs, and nobody reads them.
I love this. I think it's great. Then you have sort of a single golden source, and it puts even more emphasis on the quality of your change log. And we had an internal discussion about this the other day where we're like, okay, guys, we need to convey what is changing in terms of how people need to react. It can't just be arcane technical statements. People need to understand, like, what does this mean for you if you have an application that depends on this library or this language? So I think this is a great tool that should provide some time savings and automation, and maybe it returns us to the point of the actual changelog being a useful artifact, right? That is worthy of putting some time into it, and it can be remixed into various formats.
I think you nailed it. I think you did. You said the word useful, because that was the number one thing. Is I thought, when do I actually look at a changelog? And it's very rare. It's usually when there's something I'm not sure of that I want to see it documented. Oh, right, that changed, you know. And it's like, it's so specific. And actually, it being something that isn't another job as well, for if somebody's working on a project, they want that to feel natural and part of the workflow. So I think the same, Brian. It's brilliantly simple. It's almost surprising that this hasn't been part of our workflow until now. It's so simple but so well done. Yeah, it's great.
I guess if Microsoft had a social platform, it would have been an integration already into GitHub kind of thing. But as it doesn't have any, it probably, there was no point to it or something. I don't know. This was also interesting. There is a thing called repository to documentation. This is where it gets worrying again. You know, like that basically you have like, you go to a repo and all you do is replace the hub with git summarize, GitHub with git summarize, and then it actually generates this for you. I mean, this is now a bit unfair because we don't have enough space on the screen, but yeah, that is to me no documentation. This is, I mean, it's a different way of displaying it, but it feels to me like still there's a big change between like having a proper GitHub repo displayed and just something generated from it. But it's an interesting one to basically look at your repos and say, like, what would they look like if I put more effort into it or something? That could be one way of doing it. But it's I'm always worried about the whole, like, everybody's like, oh, AI is going to summarize everything for you, and how do I know that it picks the right things?
This one, it feels like an opportunity to create reference documentation, but documentation comes in a lot of different forms. And I mentioned earlier, we just reworked ours and we followed the diataxis framework, right? So there's supposed to be reference as one of the four types of information, but you also have conceptual explanations and how-to guides that are goal-oriented, right? That documentation is not just code comments that have been organized into a pretty website. So there's a lot of types of information that would be missing from a repo that's converted this way, I would imagine.
Well, I think it's a fun thing to try, but yeah, I agree. Like, documentation is a craft, and it's people who do it. I mean, I work with Microsoft people, with Yahoo people, done that for like 20 years. And like, documentation is the last bit effort. When you're completely lost, you go there And then if it's just generated from random code comments, probably not the thing that you're looking for. But yeah,
No.
it's interesting. Talking about this look and feel here, we had that before. There was a CSS library we talked about some weeks ago that made it look like that. But I also loved that article that was talking about like that the website is ugly because I made it. And I love that basically just people say like, you know what, I didn't have time to actually do something beautiful with it, but yeah, it's like, here's what you got, I concentrate on it. I get the same. I mean, my blog has been since 2006, and from time to time when a new form factor comes out, like a mobile phone, then I actually change the look and feel. But every time I think about like I should go away from WordPress and do something different, I write a blog post instead. Because I mean, it's like, why should I play with my blog every 2 weeks and turn it into something else? I'm not a designer. I don't, but I think it makes sense. And I'm still using the WordPress editor directly, cowboy coding live while things out there. Like I'm not actually changing anything, or the cPanel editor at times from time to time. Like the whole like having a build script on my machine to go from my GitHub to build my stuff. Don't do that at all. And but I love that ownership. Basically, like, yeah, it's internet. It's not ugly because it's ugly because I made it. I show my skills with my site rather than just like using the perfect 3-column layout with the right fonts that somebody else chose from me.
I do wonder though, Chris, I just wonder on that is there something that's changed with, you know, it feels like when the corner of the internet, this idea of like your portfolio or your personal page being your corner of the internet, feels like it isn't as much of a thing. You know, that there was people used to pour sort of weeks and days into these kind of personal sites and then update them and add their guest book. We're going way back, I'm showing my age, but you get my point.
Wow.
Yeah, but like now, I know we've just had a talk from Sarah Joy yesterday about kind of whimsy, and this idea of like whimsy design and really personal to you and very experimental has kind of gone. And you know, we've all heard that idea of every landing page looks the same now because it's all usually Next.js or it's React or it's Svelte or something like this with a kind of Tailwind based UI kind of framework / library on top, and so everything looks the same. And I do think there's something to be said for actually when I go on somebody's site who I'm guilty of it. My sites, I kind of try and make it just nice to look at, you know, and I am aware that I don't blog, not blag. I don't blog half as much as Chris, whereas Chris might not put as much time into the design, but has got days and days and days worth of years worth of articles I could read. So I don't know, maybe it's like how you view that kind of little corner of the internet and how much design's important to you. And do you care if it just looks like a Tailwind site?
Yeah.
This feels like a vibe coding opportunity to me. You can still have your little corner of the internet that you craft. If you want it to be ugly, that could be a design choice, or you could have it be beautiful and have a vibe coding platform make it beautiful for you. Because I know once uh, you wade out into the ocean of CSS, it can get very deep very quickly. And if you're not a front end designer, you're definitely going to be in over your head trying to create something that doesn't resemble all the other Tailwind sites. But maybe with AI now, people can just prompt their way to a personalized corner of the internet.
I like it.
That one ties into that one as well, like why GUIs are built at least 2.5 times or why lean software development is wrong. I kind of agree. Like there's many times when I worked on like big interfaces like the Yahoo front page or these kind of things, every single iteration of the little components of it, where it lies like were never right the first time. And like and the whole idea of like yeah, I didn't quite go into it, but I find that interesting that basically he says like GUIs are built over and over again. And yeah, I think the idea of like iterating on the interface rather than just taking the first interface that gets generated for me by a vibe coding platform is probably a very, very good idea. You never know how people use your stuff, so it's an interesting one.
Exactly. You learn a lot through their feedback and their, the breadcrumbs that they leave behind if you're tracking how they use your UI.
And yeah, talking of feedback, this was interesting as well. Like that, I remember when X shut down all the automated filtering and these kind of things, and said like community notes are actually going to be the thing to make sure that we're not showing horrible things. And it turns out that there is a huge drop in them. Like basically, like nobody does community notes on X. I want to feel smug about it because every time I talk about social platforms with people and they say like, oh yeah, the community is going to look after itself and clean itself up and make sure no horrible things are coming. And I'm like, this is not how people work. Like I put a lot of effort in free if I'm excited about the platform. But if I'm going to be the police for you, then basically pay me or do something sensible with that, or at least make sure that the most obvious things get filtered out rather than just going for like size and growth. And it's an interesting insight into like how it turned out that community notes were like a fake out. It was basically like, oh yeah, the community is gonna be grown up enough to make sure no horrible things happen on the platform. And I don't think that's ever gonna be a bet to do as a platform owner.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. The original spike in community note activity, I think, was a reaction to changes in the platform and the political situation and things like this. And people wanted to push back on information on the internet. But it's a job. It's a lot of work to do that. People aren't going to keep doing that for free. But I also wonder about this drop off if a lot of the content on the site is just AI generated, and the way that people are, I shouldn't even say people, the way that posts are being generated is maybe less human than it was before. And instead of somebody making a community note, in like a, no, that's not right, actually, kind of way, now you just have a worsening signal to noise ratio, and people can't even keep up anymore.
Yeah, I post things on like several platforms, and the only ones where I get human answers is like Blue Sky and Mastodon. On X, it's either like one or two people that always answer me no matter what I do, and because they have things to say, not because they're just horrible. But I found that like it's not a two-way interaction anymore. And I guess it showed when it basically turned the algorithm around, saying like if you point a link there, then it actually shows less up in the news than when you actually just say something. Like, I mean, I hate these posts that go like, oh, this and that, link in the comment. And you're like, no, just tell me what the hell are you talking about? Like, it's just like, it feels like
Yep,
you're playing the algorithm here. And I'm like, I'm not here for it. I'm sorry. I'm not
100%.
boosting your stuff any longer. It's really bizarre.
Something just to add to the very end of that, which is the part where it does say, because I was thinking, why is this? Because it does actually say that even though there's been a drop in users, the drop in community notes has it's not been in line with it. That effectively people are just using community notes far less than even when you take into account that there's been a drop of users. But there's the part at the end where it does say that more people will regularly turn on the platform's AI chatbot Grok for fact checking in conversations, and I've seen that quite a lot. People just saying, "Is this
I have
accurate?"
too.
Yeah, the issue obviously is there are issues around how accurate Grok is, and and it's been giving responses that maybe the owner has not been too happy about. So there's a little bit of tweaking going on there. Speaking very politically, but you get my point.
That was also an interesting one. Like search parameters are state of an application, and this is an interesting one because I've seen it in performance. Like when I basically, every time I built something, I had a search and it gave you results back, I cached them and say like, okay, and I also cached the search. And I'm like, if it matches that one, don't do a lookup in the database, just give you this cached thing back. But on the other hand, search parameters can be whatever, and especially a massive attack vector as well. So if you actually treat them as state with unfiltered in your application, then you're in for a lot of trouble. So it's an interesting one. Like, is it really state or is it part of the internet that points to my app? Is the question then.
I think it's state insofar as it conveys what the visitor has been looking for in some way, and you want to retain that context as you maybe move around your app. But you're right, you also need to filter those things. You can't just have state injection through search params. But I haven't read this one by Tanner, but I'll read anything Tanner writes.
Okay.
It's good. I'm
Cool.
wondering if it feels like state, just that's how it is for me. That I think early on I did question that, like, what's the difference between this and state? Surely it's the same thing, but it's only really usable as state when it's like really flat, very small, couple of little bits. So realistically, you're not going to use it as state, but yeah, I do think that's something that probably doesn't get explained very clearly. I think when you start using them, you sort of think, well, why am I actually using these? Why do I not just, you don't necessarily differentiate between that and just the state, especially if you're using React from day one, right? It's in your kind of mental model, everything is state. Yeah, it's a very good article though. I'd recommend it, Brian. You'll enjoy it.
Cool. Let's end with a fun thing to show to your colleagues, parrot.live. If you go to the terminal and you actually do curl parrot.live, this is what happens.
Nice.
So in essence, it used the GIF and then turned it into ASCII art and then basically runs it through that. And you can do that with any of the PS1 files here that they're showing in that repo. And yeah, if you're unhappy with your terminal not using enough memory, that's a great thing to start. I had a few people that said like it crashed their WSL on Windows, so I don't know what's going on there, but fair enough.
It's worth it.
Yeah, and I mean this brings us to the end. Okay, terminate. Already terminated. Fair enough. This brings us to the end of the show. So thanks, Brian, for coming in and talking about all the bits and bobs with us. This was
Thanks
great.
for having me on.
Come again?
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no worries. It's good to fill in, and we're gonna hear more about you in the near future, and we're gonna have a coffee with developers with you. Next week we're gonna have Penpot here, who are gonna talk about all their good stuff, how they're re-rendering things on a screen, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to that because I want to geek out with that thing. I've got one last question. Why do dogs float?
Why do dogs float? The hair
Because
must be lighter than water.
Because they're good boys.
The goodest boys. The goodest.
All right. And with that, any last words from you, Dan? What do you want to end with today?
I can't top that. Have a good week. It's less than 1 month until the World Congress, worldcongress.dev. Get your tickets. Prices go up in 2 days. So go there before Friday. Otherwise, you're ending your week with slightly more expensive end of the week. There you go. worldcongress.dev.
Cool.
Looking
and
forward
Brian,
to it.
Any last words from you?
Come see me at WeAreDevelopers. I'll be there, and I'm going to give it an ominous talk. 402 payment required. What is that about? Ooh.
I don't know. Foundations don't have any money, right? So what's going on there? I don't know.
This is bigger than us.
Anyways, this was WeAreDevelopers Live for today. We see you next Wednesday with people from Penpot, and yeah. Thanks again to Brian from Algorand Foundation, and thanks to Dan, and thanks for watching. See you soon.
Okay.